Diana stood in my doorway, soaked through from the rain, asking to borrow something dry while her clothes tumbled in my dryer. That Thursday evening was one of those restless ones where everything felt charged with possibility. I was just sitting at my desk, wrestling with my thesis on second chances, when the doorbell rang. Diana was drenched, apologizing, holding grocery bags Sarah had asked her to drop off. It didn't seem like a big deal, lending her Sarah's robe while we waited. But seeing her emerge from my bathroom, vulnerable in her daughter's clothes, something shifted. "Do you think I still deserve to be loved?" she asked suddenly, like the question had been burning her throat. Sarah wouldn't be home for hours. We both knew it. I should have said something safe. Instead, I stood up, crossed the room, stopped just close enough to see her hands trembling. "But before we begin, let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world." Should have known that night would change everything. 8 months into dating Sarah, and I thought I had our routine figured out. She'd come home exhausted from her hospital shifts, we'd order takeout, and she'd fall asleep halfway through whatever show we were watching. It was comfortable, predictable, until her mother arrived. Mum's moving back to town, Sarah had mentioned casually over coffee that morning. Dad left her for someone at his firm. "Can you come to dinner tonight?" I don't want her sitting alone in her new apartment already. I hadn't known what to expect from Diana Castellano, but when Sarah opened the door that evening, I found myself looking past my girlfriend to the woman standing slightly behind her, holding a covered dish and wearing an apologetic smile. "You must be Ethan," Diana said softly, extending her free hand. Her grip was warm but tentative, like she wasn't sure she had permission to take up space. I brought dessert. Nothing special, just an old family recipe. Sarah ushered us inside, and I watched Diana move through the apartment with a kind of muted grace. She placed the dessert in the kitchen, deflecting Sarah's praise with a small wave. "Oh, it's just something simple. You probably don't even remember it from when you were little." We settled into the living room, Sarah and I on the couch, while Diana chose an armchair slightly removed from us. She perched on the edge, her posture perfect but somehow suggesting she might flee at any moment. The wrap dress she wore was elegant but conservative, and she kept smoothing invisible wrinkles from her skirt. "How are your shifts going?" Diana asked Sarah, and I noticed how carefully she directed the conversation away from herself. "Brutal," Sarah sighed, slumping against me. 72 hours this week already. I barely remember what my bed looks like. I'd grown used to Sarah's exhaustion, the way she carried the weight of her residency in the dark circles under her eyes. But tonight, I found my attention drawn to Diana's reactions. The slight furrow of concern between her brows. The way she leaned forward almost imperceptibly when Sarah spoke. "The divorce finally went through last month," Sarah mentioned later. As we were eating, I felt rather than saw Diana's flinch. "Mum's been having a rough time adjusting." "I'm doing fine," Diana interjected quickly. "The new apartment is lovely. So much easier to manage than that big house." Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Throughout dinner, I caught Diana watching me when Sarah was focused on her plate. There was something unreadable in her expression, not quite assessment, not quite curiosity. Each time our eyes met, she would look away quickly, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. The gesture seemed unconscious, almost vulnerable. "We should watch something," Sarah suggested after we'd cleared the plates. "Mum, you haven't seen that new series I was telling you about." The suggestion created an immediate logistical challenge. Sarah's apartment had one couch and the armchair, but the TV was positioned so the armchair had a terrible viewing angle. After some awkward shuffling, we ended up on the couch, Sarah in the middle, me on her right, and Diana carefully pressed against the far left armrest. I could feel the careful mathematics of inches in Diana's posture, the way she held herself, to ensure there was no possibility of accidental contact. She had crossed her legs away from us, angled herself slightly toward the door. Every few minutes, her hand would rise to touch her bare ring finger, then drop back to her lap as if caught in a forbidden act, The forced normalcy of the evening continued, but something had shifted in the air. Every time Sarah leaned against me, I found myself aware of Diana's presence on her other side. The faint scent of her perfume, something subtle and warm, drifted across the space she worked so hard to maintain. When she laughed at something, on screen, the sound was rich but restrained, like she was trying not to draw attention to herself. Sarah's head grew heavy on my shoulder, as exhaustion caught up with her. She fought it for a while, but her blinks grew longer, her comments less frequent. I felt the moment she drifted off, her breathing evening out into the familiar rhythm of sleep. In the quiet that followed, Diana's careful distance seemed to take on a different weight. Neither of us moved, trapped in the peculiar intimacy of sharing space with someone else's unconsciousness between us. The TV cast shifting shadows across her profile, and I found myself studying the gentle curve of her cheek, the way she worried her bottom lip between her teeth. The movie played softly in the background, some romantic comedy Sarah had picked, though I'd lost track of the plot 30 minutes ago. My attention kept drifting to the careful way Diana held herself, perched on the far end of the couch like a bird ready to take flight. Sarah's head grew heavier against my shoulder as exhaustion from her 72-hour week caught up with. Her eye felt the exact moment Sarah drifted off, her body relaxing into the familiar weight of deep sleep. The silence that followed felt thick with unspoken words, broken only by the quiet dialogue from the TV. Diana remained perfectly still, as if movement might shatter something fragile in the air. "We should probably let her rest," I whispered, carefully shifting Sarah to lie more comfortably on the couch. "She's been pulling doubles all week." Diana nodded, relief flickering across her features. "The kitchen needs tidying anyway." She rose gracefully, gathering a few stray glasses from the coffee table. I followed her into the kitchen, where dishes from dinner still waited in the sink. Without discussion, we fell into an easy rhythm, Diana washing while I dried. The soft clink of plates and the running water created a gentle barrier between us and Sarah's sleeping form in the living room. "Sarah mentioned you're in graduate school," Diana said, handing me a sudsy plate. Her voice was quiet, but more natural than it had been all evening. "Yeah, English literature. I'm working on my thesis now, actually." I carefully dried the plate, placing it in the cabinet. "It's about second chances in literature, specifically how society tends to misread starting over as some kind of failure, rather than an act of courage." Diana's hands stilled in the soapy water. A drop of water traced down her wrist as she turned to look at me. "That's an interesting perspective. Would you elaborate?" Something in her tone made me want to choose my words carefully. "Well, there's this persistent narrative that we get one shot at life, one career, one great love, one chance to be happy. But when you look at literature across cultures and time periods, you see this recurring theme of redemption and renewal." She resumed washing, but her movements were slower, more thoughtful. "Go on." "I'm arguing that we've internalized this idea that starting over means we failed the first time. But what if it's the opposite? What if it takes more courage to begin again than to stay in something that isn't working anymore?" Diana reached for a wine glass, cleaning it with particular attention. Her voice was barely above a whisper when she spoke. "Do you really believe that? That people can begin again? At any age?" The question hung between us, heavy with meaning beyond academic theory. I watched her hands, steady despite the weight of what she was really asking. "I do. I think sometimes it takes half a lifetime to figure out what we really want, or to gather the strength to chase it." She turned toward me then, still holding the wine glass. The kitchen light caught the lingering moisture on her hands, making them glisten. We were standing closer than we had all evening, the narrow space between counter and sink bringing us into an unexpected intimacy. "That's a surprisingly hopeful view for someone your age," she said. But there was no condescension in her tone, only a kind of wistful wonder. "Maybe I'm an old soul." I offered her a dish towel for the glass. Our fingers brushed as she took it, and I noticed how she still wore her wedding ring, though on her right hand now. From the living room came the sound of Sarah stirring, followed by the creak of the couch as she shifted position. Diana stepped back quickly, putting distance between us. The glass in her hands trembled slightly. Before she set it down with exaggerated care, the comfortable atmosphere we'd built evaporated, replaced by something more complicated. Diana busied herself wiping down the counter, though it was already clean. I could see tension creeping back into her shoulders. Erasing the brief moment of openness we'd shared, Sarah made another small sound in her sleep, and Diana glanced toward the living room, her expression a mix of guilt and something else I couldn't quite name. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too intimate for whatever had just passed between us. Diana gathered her purse and coat, movements deliberate as Sarah stirred on the couch, blinking away sleep. The soft lamplight caught the silver threading through Diana's dark hair as she adjusted her scarf. "I'm so sorry, Mum," Sarah mumbled, rubbing her eyes. "I can't believe I fell asleep during your first visit." "Sweetheart, you're working impossible hours. Sleep is exactly what you need." Diana's voice carried that particular maternal softness. Reserved for moments of genuine concern, Sarah pushed herself up from the couch, still groggy, and wrapped her arms around her mother. I watched Diana close her eyes during the embrace, holding on a moment longer than necessary. When they separated, something vulnerable flickered across her face before she masked it with a smile. She turned to me then, extending her hand. "Thank you for the evening, and for that fascinating discussion about your thesis." Our handshake lingered, not inappropriately, but long enough for me to register the softness of her skin, the slight tremor in her fingers. "Thanks for the dessert, it really was exceptional." "Oh, just an old recipe." She deflected the compliment with a small wave. But I caught the pleased smile she tried to hide as she turned away. The next week settled into a blur of brief encounters. With Sarah between her endless hospital shifts, she'd come home exhausted, barely able to keep her eyes open through a quick meal before collapsing into bed. Sometimes, she'd call during her breaks, voice heavy with fatigue. "Mum stopped by again today," she mentioned during one of these calls. "Left groceries since I haven't had time to shop. She got those protein bars you like to." I pictured Diana, in Sarah's kitchen, carefully arranging items in the refrigerator. Maybe pausing to wipe down a counter, or straighten a crooked magnet. "That's thoughtful of her." "Yeah," Sarah's voice softened. "She's been trying so hard, since the divorce." I prompted, gently. Sarah made a sound somewhere between a sigh and a scoff. "Dad left her for his marketing director, 15 years younger, of course." Such a cliché, it's almost funny, except it's not funny at all. She paused, and I heard the distant sound of a hospital page in the background. Mom's taking it harder than she lets on. I thought about Diana's question in the kitchen, about starting over at any age, and felt an uncomfortable twist in my stomach. Her words carried new weight now, loaded with context I hadn't fully understood at the time. "I worry about her being alone so much," Sarah continued. "She doesn't really know anyone here anymore. All her old friends are back in the suburbs, and most of them sided with Dad anyway." "That must be rough," I said, trying to keep my voice neutral despite the surge of protectiveness I felt. "Actually," Sarah hesitated. "Would you mind if she stopped by sometimes, even when I'm not there? Just to have someone to talk to." I know it's asking a lot, but she seemed really interested in your thesis work, and honestly, it would make me feel better knowing she's not just sitting alone in her apartment all the time. My heart kicked against my ribs. "Of course," I said, perhaps too quickly. "I mean, yeah, that would be fine. If it would help, you're the best." The smile in Sarah's voice was evident. "I have to run, they're paging me for a consult. Love you." Before I could respond, she'd hung up. I sat there, holding my phone, Sarah's last words echoing in my head. We'd been saying love you for months now, but tonight it felt different, heavier, more complicated. I thought about Diana's hands in the soapy water, the way she'd looked at me when we talked about second chances, the careful distance she kept until we were alone in the kitchen. Sarah had just handed me permission to spend time with her mother. Wrapped in the perfect excuse of academic discussion and friendly support, It should have felt simple, straightforward, a kind gesture toward my girlfriend's newly divorced mother. Instead, I found myself remembering the moment Diana's fingers had brushed mine as she took the dish towel. And the guilt that followed felt like a preview of things to come. I was deep in research notes when the doorbell rang. 3 gentle chimes that made me glance at my phone. No messages from Sarah about visitors. When I opened the door, Diana stood there with 2 brown paper bags pressed against her chest like a shield. "Oh," she said, blinking. I thought, "Sarah mentioned you'd be at the library today. Changed plans. The Wi-Fi here's more reliable." I noticed how she shifted her weight, uncertain. "Those look heavy. Just some groceries Sarah asked for. I can leave them and go. I don't want to disturb your work." "Actually, I could use a break." I stepped back from the doorway. "Would you like some coffee?" "I just made a fresh pot." Diana hesitated at the threshold, 1 foot barely crossing the line between hallway and apartment. Her eyes darted to the kitchen, then back to me. "I shouldn't. It's good coffee," I said softly. "And Sarah would probably appreciate knowing we didn't let her groceries melt." A small smile tugged at her lips. "Well, when you put it that way." She stepped inside, and I caught a hint of her perfume. Something light and floral that reminded me of spring mornings. We moved to the kitchen, where Diana began unpacking the bags with methodical care. "Sarah mentioned you like protein bars, so I got the dark chocolate ones. And she needed more of those instant noodles she eats during shifts. Though I also got her some proper vegetables a mother can try, right?" She continued explaining each item's purpose, her voice filling the silence with unnecessary detail. My gaze drifted to her hands as she worked, noting how they trembled slightly when they weren't occupied. I poured 2 cups of coffee, sliding one across the counter toward her. "Thank you," she murmured, then paused as something caught her eye. "Is that Narutha on your shelf?" I followed her gaze to my bookcase. "Good eye. Are you familiar with his work?" "I used to read constantly." Diana's voice softened with memory. "Before the marriage, before everything became about maintaining the perfect home, the perfect schedule," she trailed off, then gestured to the worn volume. "May I?" I nodded, and she crossed to the bookshelf, pulling out my well-loved copy of 20 Love Poems and a Song of Despair. Her fingers traced the spine with something like reverence. "I haven't read poetry in 20 years, she admitted, opening to a random page. "Would you like to borrow it?" She looked up, surprised. "Oh, I couldn't. It's clearly special to you." "That's why it should be shared." As I reached for the book, our fingers brushed. We both pulled back quickly. The poetry collection nearly tumbling between us. I caught it, holding it out again more carefully. "I should probably go," Diana said, but her eyes lingered on the book in her hands. Then, almost hesitantly, "You were telling me about your thesis the other night, about second chances." "Would you?" She paused, weighing her words. "Would you tell me more?" I found myself thinking about it after I left. The request felt heavier than simple academic interest. I gestured to the kitchen table, and she sat, seemingly forgetting her hurry to leave. I explained my research into literary patterns of redemption, how society often misreads new beginnings as failures rather than acts of courage. Diana leaned forward, elbows on the table, coffee cooling forgotten beside her. "But how do you determine if someone deserves another chance? Isn't there a point where it's too late?" "I don't think time is the relevant factor," I said carefully. "It's more about recognizing when we've outgrown the stories we've been living in." She absorbed this, turning the poetry book over in her hands. "And what happens to the old story? The people in it? Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is allow ourselves to become someone new, even if others aren't ready for that change." Diana glanced at her watch then, startling at the time. "Oh God, it's been an hour. I didn't mean to take up your whole afternoon." "It was a welcome break," I assured her. Walking her to the door, she paused in the doorway, holding the poetry book against her chest. "I'll return this soon." The way she phrased it as a question made something twist in my chest. "Whenever you're ready, no rush." After she left, I stood in the kitchen, staring at her empty coffee cup, still sitting on the table. Lipstick staining the rim. Over the next 3 weeks, Diana's visits became a quiet routine. She'd arrive with groceries or books to return, always when Sarah was scheduled for late shifts. We'd drink coffee and talk about everything and nothing. Her thoughts on Neretha, my thesis progress, the way afternoon light played through the kitchen window. I found myself watching the clock on Sarah's workdays, anticipating the soft knock that meant Diana had found another excuse to stop by. If Sarah noticed the dwindling groceries being restocked more frequently than her shopping requests, she never mentioned it. That Thursday, dark clouds had been threatening all afternoon. I was organizing research notes when urgent knocking pulled me from my work. Diana stood in the hallway, completely drenched, her thin sweater clinging to her shoulders and water dripping from her hair. "I'm so sorry," she said immediately, hugging herself. "The storm caught me halfway here. I can come back another time. Don't be ridiculous." I opened the door wider. "Come in before you catch cold." She hesitated on the threshold, rainwater pooling at her feet. "I'm making a mess of your floor. Nothing a towel won't fix." I headed to the bathroom, calling over my shoulder, "Stay there, I'll get you something dry." When I returned with towels and Sarah's terrycloth robe, Diana was still rooted to the same spot, looking smaller than usual as she dripped onto the welcome mat. I handed her the items, careful not to touch her cold hands. "The bathroom's through there," I said. "We can put your clothes in the dryer." Her cheeks flushed slightly. "I don't want to impose, it's not imposing if I'm offering." I gestured toward the bathroom. "Go on. I'll make some tea, you must be freezing." 10 minutes later, Diana emerged, wearing Sarah's robe, her wet clothes bundled against her chest. I took them without comment and headed to the laundry closet while she settled onto the far end of the couch, tucking her feet underneath her like she was trying to take up less space. When I returned with 2 mugs of chamomile tea, she was staring out the window at the rain. "Thank you," she murmured, accepting the warm cup. For all of this, of course, I sat on the opposite end of the couch, acutely aware of how the situation felt more intimate than our usual kitchen table conversations. We sipped tea in silence for a moment before Diana spoke. "I used to have so many plans, before I got married." She traced the rim of her mug. "I wanted to travel to Italy, learn photography properly. I even thought about writing." "What stopped you?" "Life, marriage, always putting everyone else first until," she shrugged. "Until 47 felt too late to start over." "It's never too late," I said. "I've put off plenty of my own plans, living abroad, writing a novel instead of analyzing other people's words." Diana turned toward me, interest sparking in her eyes. "You want to write fiction? Someday? When I stop being afraid of failing at it?" "That's exactly it," she said softly. "The fear. Since turning 45, I've felt invisible. Like I missed my chance at everything. And now, being divorced at 47, she laughed without humor. I feel discarded. Past my expiration date." The words tumbled out before I could stop them. "You're far from invisible, Diana. You command attention without even trying." I swallowed hard, but continued. "Sarah actually inherited that from you, that natural magnetism." Color bloomed across her cheeks. She stood abruptly, setting down her tea. "I should check if my clothes are dry. I'll get them." I moved to the dryer, retrieving her still warm sweater and slacks. When I turned, she was closer than I expected. As I handed over the clothes, our fingers brushed. Neither of us pulled away immediately. The moment stretched, charged with something I couldn't name, until Diana finally stepped back, clutching her clothes to her chest. "I should change," she whispered, and disappeared into the bathroom. I stood there, my fingertips tingling where they had touched hers, listening to the rain against the windows and wondering what line we'd just crossed. I sat on the couch, hyper-aware of every rustle from behind the bathroom door as Diana changed. The sound of fabrics sliding against skin, the soft clicks of buttons, each noise felt magnified in the rain-muffled apartment. I tried to focus on my laptop screen, but the words blurred together. When she emerged, her clothes were perfectly smoothed, hair carefully combed, but a lingering flush colored her cheeks. She'd worked to restore her composed exterior, yet something in her movements remained flustered, less certain than usual. The sharp buzz of my phone made us both jump. Sarah's name lit up the screen. "Hey," I answered, watching Diana freeze mid-step. "Just wanted to let you know, I'm finishing up early," Sarah said, her voice tired but cheerful. "Should be home in about an hour. Want to order takeout?" "Sure, sounds good." I tried to keep my tone casual, but Diana's expression had already shifted, guilt washing across her features, mixed with something else I couldn't quite read. "Perfect. Love you," Sarah said before hanging up. Diana was already gathering her purse, movements quick and precise. I should go before, she didn't finish the sentence, but we both knew what she meant. At the door, she paused, one hand on the doorframe. "Could we?" She took a breath, started again. "Would you mind if we kept these conversations between us?" I waited, letting her find the words. "It's just that Sarah," Diana's fingers worried at the strap of her purse. "She wouldn't understand, she might misconstrue our friendship." The word friendship hung between us, inadequate, but safer than any alternative. "Of course," I said. "I understand," she nodded, relief and something heavier in her eyes. "Thank you." Then she was gone, the door clicking shut behind her. Over the next week, our secret took root and grew. It started with texts, Diana asking about a poetry reference, me responding with analysis that went beyond academic interest. Soon we were exchanging thoughts about books under the thin pretense of helping my research. 3 days after the rainstorm, Diana suggested meeting at the Blue Cup, a coffee shop across town. "Sarah never goes there," she added quickly. "It's too far from the hospital." I knew I should refuse. The suggestion marked a shift from circumstantial meetings to intentional ones. But I found myself agreeing, suggesting a time the next afternoon. That first coffee shop meeting stretched into 3 that week. We claimed a corner table each time, conversations flowing for hours. Diana laughed, more easily there, away from Sarah's apartment and its accompanying guilt. Her whole demeanor softened, as if she could finally exhale. I caught myself storing up interesting thoughts throughout the day. Mental notes of things to share with her. I noticed everything now. The way she tucked her hair behind her ear when considering a point. How she always ordered mint tea instead of coffee. The light that sparked in her eyes when our discussion turned to art. "I used to sketch," she told me during our 3rd meeting, fingers tracing the rim of her teacup. "Nothing serious, just little moments I wanted to remember." The way morning light hit the kitchen table, Sarah sleeping in her crib, random strangers in parks. "Do you still draw?" She shook her head. I stopped when she paused. When I started believing I wasn't allowed to notice beauty anymore. That it wasn't appropriate for a married woman to spend hours watching strangers or chasing perfect light. And now I'm noticing everything again. Her eyes met mine briefly before darting away. It's overwhelming sometimes, how much there is to see when you let yourself look. I understood exactly what she meant. I'd been seeing the world differently, to more vividly, more urgently, like every moment carried extra weight. The guilt was always there. A constant undercurrent beneath our conversations. But it was becoming easier to push aside, to justify these meetings as harmless. We were just talking, after all. Just 2 people sharing thoughts about books and art and second chances. But when Diana's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah during our last coffee shop meeting, the way we both startled at the name on the screen told a different story. This wasn't just friendship anymore, even if neither of us was ready to name what it was becoming. I used to think guilt would feel heavier. Instead, it's become a constant whisper, light enough to ignore when I need to, but persistent as a shadow. Tonight, at dinner, I caught myself watching Diana's hands as she spread her napkin across her lap. An elegant, practiced motion that spoke of years of similar gestures. I noticed how the restaurant's warm lighting caught the auburn highlights in her hair, how she touched her water glass exactly 3 times before taking a sip. Sarah sat beside me, scrolling through patient charts on her phone between bites of salad. I should have been paying attention to her, my girlfriend of 8 months, but my eyes kept drifting across the table. "The salmon here is excellent," Diana said, breaking a silence I hadn't noticed falling. Sarah glanced up briefly. "Oh, yes. I always mean to try it." The conversation lapsed again. I watched Diana cut her fish into precise bites, each movement measured and careful. When her phone buzzed, Sarah's whole posture changed. "No, no, no," she muttered, then looked up apologetically. "They need me at the hospital. Mrs. Rodriguez's numbers are dropping." She was already gathering her purse halfway out of her chair. "I'm so sorry, Mom. I'll make it up to you." "Of course, sweetheart." Diana's smile was practiced, perfected, over years of similar disappointments. "Go, your patients need you." Sarah kissed my cheek quickly, then hurried away, leaving behind the scent of hospital antiseptic and her half-eaten salad. Diana and I sat in awkward silence. We should leave, that would be the proper thing to do. Instead, I heard myself asking, "Coffee?" "Yes," she answered too quickly. "Coffee would be nice." The waiter cleared Sarah's plate while we ordered coffee. Diana stirred 2 sugar packets into hers, watching the liquid swirl. "Are you happy?" she asked suddenly, then seemed to regret the question. "With Sarah, I mean. You seem patient with her schedule." The honest answer caught in my throat. Was I happy? 2 months ago, I would have said yes without hesitation. Now, Sarah's very focused, I said instead. "Her work is important." "That's not what I asked." Diana's eyes met mine, steady and searching. "I know." She nodded slowly. "I see how she takes you for granted sometimes. The way she checks her phone during dinner, cancels plans last minute. I know she's doing important work, but," she trailed off, then added softly, "you deserve someone's full attention." The moment stretched dangerous and electric between us. My coffee cooled untouched. "I envy you both sometimes," Diana continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're so young. You have time to make mistakes, to start over if things don't work out at 47. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. 47 isn't old," I said firmly. "You have decades ahead of you." "Decades of what?" Her bitter tone surprised me. "Men my age want younger women. Just look at my ex-husband, traded me in for the newer model the moment I started showing where my hand moved involuntarily toward hers on the table. But I caught myself. The gesture hung unfinished between us. My phone buzzed. "Sarah. Sorry again. Don't think I'll make it back. You two finished dinner without me." I showed Diana the message. Something shifted in her expression, relief, guilt, both. "We should probably have dessert then," she said. To justify keeping the table, I ordered the chocolate torte she'd been eyeing earlier. When it arrived, I offered her the first bite from my fork, without thinking. She hesitated for just a moment before leaning forward to accept it. The intimacy of the gesture hit us both at once, more charged than any kiss could have been. Her lips closed around the fork, and I forgot how to breathe. We finished dessert, in charged silence, then asked for separate checks. Outside the restaurant, we paused awkwardly. "I'll get an Uber," Diana said. "You parked in the garage, right?" I nodded, knowing I should offer her a ride, knowing exactly why I couldn't. "Good night then," she said softly. Already turning away, I watched her walk toward the corner, her heels clicking against the sidewalk, her wrap dress swaying gently in the evening breeze. I watched until she disappeared around the corner, knowing I should look away, knowing I couldn't. I remember every detail of that night with perfect clarity. The way the city lights sparkled below my 7th-floor balcony. How the spring breeze carried the scent of blooming magnolias. And most of all, how Diana's text about her forgotten jacket felt like destiny disguised as coincidence. Sarah had left for her overnight shift hours ago. When Diana knocked, I already had 2 wine glasses ready. We both knew the jacket was just an excuse. "I should just grab it and go," she said, hovering in the doorway. Or you could stay, I offered. The sunset's beautiful from the balcony. She hesitated, then stepped inside. Just for a moment, I poured us each a glass of red wine, and we settled into the balcony chairs. The city spread out before us, a tapestry of twinkling lights and long shadows. Diana wrapped her cardigan tighter, despite the mild evening. "Do you ever feel like you've been sleeping through your life?" she asked suddenly. "Like you closed your eyes at 23, and when you opened them again, 24 years had passed." I turned to study her profile in the fading light. "What would you have done differently?" "Everything. Nothing." She took a slow sip of wine. "I had all these dreams, photography exhibitions, traveling through Italy, writing a book. But somehow, other people's needs always came first. Now I wonder if it's too late." "It's not too late for anything you want," I said softly. Diana set down her wineglass and turned to face me fully. The city lights reflected in her eyes as she asked, "Do you think I still deserve to be loved?" The rawness in her voice undid me completely. All the careful walls I had built crumbled in an instant. "Yes," I breathed. "God, Diana, yes. You deserve to be seen, to be chosen, to be cherished every single day." I reached out, barely touching her cheek. She leaned into my palm with such naked need that my heart squeezed painfully. We were suddenly breathing the same air, the space between us charged and dangerous. "Tell me to stop," I whispered. Diana's eyes met mine, vulnerable and certain, all at once. "I should want you to stop," she breathed, "but I don't." When I kissed her, it felt like coming home to a place I had never been. Her lips were soft, tentative at first, then desperately hungry. My fingers tangled in her hair as she pressed closer, years of loneliness dissolving in the warmth of her mouth against mine. The sound of a key in the lock shattered everything. Sarah was home early. Sarah's key scraped in the lock, and Diana and I jerked apart like startled birds. My heart hammered as Diana snatched her jacket from the chair, fingers trembling. We barely had time to step away from each other before Sarah appeared in the doorway, looking exhausted but alert. "Mum," Sarah's eyes darted between us. "What are you doing here?" "I left my jacket earlier," Diana said, holding it up like evidence. Her voice was remarkably steady. "Just came to grab it before heading home." Sarah nodded slowly, but something flickered in her expression, doubt, maybe, or intuition. That night marked the beginning of 2 weeks of exquisite torture. Diana and I avoided being alone together, but every group dinner felt charged with unspoken words. "Mum seems different lately," Sarah mentioned one evening, almost glowing. "Have you noticed anything?" I shrugged, guilt churning in my stomach. Diana's single text arrived on a Tuesday night, "I'm sorry." I typed and deleted responses until my fingers ached, but sent nothing. Then Sarah found our messages about the poetry book. Simple words that said too much. "How long?" she asked, her voice tight. "Why my mother?" I couldn't lie anymore. Sarah's voice was terrifyingly calm. "Tell me everything, every meeting, every conversation." I described the coffee shop visits, the literary discussions, our shared moments in the kitchen. I stopped short of the balcony kiss, but my hesitation spoke volumes. "Do you love her?" Sarah's question hung in the air like smoke. Before I could answer, the door opened. Diana stood there, phone in hand, face pale. She must have gotten Sarah's voicemail. Taking in our tear-stained faces, she understood immediately. "This is my fault," Diana said, stepping forward. "I'm the adult. I should have known better." "You were jealous," Sarah spat. "You deliberately seduced him." Diana didn't deny the attraction, just whispered, "I never meant for this to happen." I found my voice, then. "What we have is real. These feelings, they grew beyond my control." Sarah looked between us, eyes hollow. "Who are you choosing?" My silence was answer enough. Sarah's departure left a vacuum of silence. Diana and I sat on the couch, the weight of consequences settling around us like dust after an explosion. "I should go," Diana whispered, rising. We've done enough damage for one night. Stay. The word escaped before I could catch it. Just to talk. We both knew I was asking for more than conversation. Diana turned, studying my face in the dim living room light. Her eyes held questions she needed answered. Are you sure? She stepped closer. Do you understand what choosing this means? I stood, closing the distance between us. I've never been more certain of anything. When she took my hand, the touch carried a certainty that made everything else Sarah's pain. The chaos we'd created, tomorrow's consequences, fade to background noise. We moved toward the bedroom, as if in a dream, each step deliberate and conscious. Diana's hand trembled slightly in mine. At the doorway, she paused, giving me one final chance to reconsider. Then she whispered my name, both question and answer. Wrapped in those soft syllables, what followed was gentle and inevitable. Two souls who'd found each other against impossible odds. Afterward, we lay intertwined, saying nothing about tomorrow, or Sarah, or the wreckage waiting beyond this room. For now, there was only this an unexpected second chance we'd both reached for with both hands. I woke to the gentle aroma of coffee and morning sunlight streaming through kitchen windows. Diana stood at the counter wearing my white dress, shirt from the night before, her hair softly tousled. Something in her seemed lighter, younger, as if years of careful self-containment had melted away overnight. When she saw me, her smile was shy but carried no shame. Good morning, she said, offering me a steaming mug. Over coffee, we talked about the practical things. Diana would look for an apartment nearby. We agreed to give Sarah whatever time and space she needed to process this. I suggested we take things slowly in public, and Diana nodded, understanding. During the divorce, she said quietly, James told me I was unlovable. Her fingers traced the rim of her cup. That no one would want me at my age. I reached across the table, taking her hand. You're the most lovable person I've ever known. Tears welled in her eyes, but she held my gaze steady. At the door, she asked, what will you tell people who question our age difference? The truth, I said. Love doesn't follow convenient timelines. Her goodbye kiss was unhurried, unafraid. Walking away, she turned back once, mouthing thank you before disappearing down the hallway toward her second chance. If this story found you at the right time, subscribe and set reminders. Tomorrow's might be the nudge, the hug, or the promise you've been waiting for.